Okay. Hi, I'm Joe Ohio. As you know, I'm a police officer. And I'm watching those videos of the protests. Now, I'd like to explain some things that I'm not defending at all what happened there, one way or the other. I don't have enough information. And just saying that at times, I've had even some of my close personal liberal friends just have incredulous gasp when I say that, saying, how could you not see enough right there, you know? The thing is that the way police work and the way that the laws have supported police officers and what they can do, whether they're right or not, again, I'm not at this point saying one way or the other whether how I agree with those laws, because there's a lot a lot of nuances in that. Now, ignoring these protests, please try to put that out of your head for now. Just the way police works. Because I see a lot of resisting arrest videos, and I see people just immediately saying that, obviously it's wrong. You see a little petite 5'2", 100-pound girl, being manhandled, quote unquote. And by the way, that is one thing I will say about this protest, is that there did appear at times it was just a little bit too rough, and it was. I don't know that I don't want to judge other officers, on what they were doing. It seemed, though, that they possibly were using probably more than they needed to, but there's a very big caveat to that. Now, I told you to keep that out of your head, and here I brought it up, but the point I want to make is, no matter what, let's just start out with the easy scenario. I am dispatched to a house where there may be a murder suspect who has murdered his wife and children in another county, and he's in our county, and we have information he might be there, and we don't have time to get SWAT set up, but he might be leaving, so we respond. Dude comes outside, sees me, puts his hands up. I'll have another officer there. I got him at gunpoint, and let's just say he matches the guy that committed all the murders, but he's not the guy. I don't know that. The other officer doesn't. It's still absolutely protected by the courts if we believe that that's the person. Now, of course, if the murder suspect is a male white with a beard and 200 pounds, and out walks a really skinny black guy, of course that's not going to be protected. But if he comes out with a beard and has all the, pretty much looks like him, if he's not the guy that we're really after, but we don't know that yet as police officers. I order him to get him, turn around, keep his hands up, get down on his knees, whatever. Well, if he starts, because he's not the guy, he has no idea why we're there, why we got him at gunpoint. He starts saying, "What the fuck are you doing? I don't know what you got the wrong guy." Well, the bad guys say that too, often. And so here's the thing: is a murder suspect, especially, right? And happens all the time, or happens often, I should say, not all the time. You'll have that they have, they're carrying a gun in their waistband or somewhere on them, that won't necessarily be visible. And it's not always a great big gun. It could be a small little gun, like a 22 or a 380. As I come up on him, and I go to arrest him, and he's, just incredulous, and he's just like, "Why are you arresting me?" And he turns on me. Like, "What do you think you're doing? I didn't do anything wrong." It doesn't matter. And I may even consider that, okay, it's possible this is like his brother that looks just like him, whatever. I don't know, but I can't assume that. More importantly, I have no idea who is waiting at the window or at the door. I have no idea who might come up behind me. I have no idea if he's got a buddy behind him, which has happened, where officers have been killed when they're trying to arrest somebody else and they're distracted. Nonetheless, he turns on me. Now, this happened in my town, where an officer went to an unimposed, guy that didn't seem very, aggressive at all, kind of a skinny, kind of nerdy guy that was just simply was trespassing in a public museum. He was, whatever it was, he was doing something, and the staff had decided to, ask him to leave, and he didn't. And so one of the officers, two of the officers, walked up to him to talk to him, and he turned around, to walk away from him. And I realize that causes a lot of issue with people, that you should be able to turn around and walk away from an officer. I can get into that later. But anyway, he grabbed hold of his arm and, didn't really go at him aggressively necessarily. And I hate to second guess an officer who was killed in line of duty. But the guy turned around and resisted on him. And when he turned around, he had a gun and just blasted the officer right in the head and killed him. This is why I can never let anybody, even a non-imposing little person, turn on me. It's not about respect my authority. It's not about that at all. What it's about is that in the past, officers have been killed because they let their guard down. On somebody because they were small. There was an old man that was put in the back of a cruiser once, and they let their guard down. He's just an old man. He was on the side of the road. They thought he was like had a mental, like maybe an Alzheimer's patient, and they killed, when they put in the back, they just pulled a little gun out and shot at least one of the officers in the back of the head. I can't remember who shot both of them. And so as you see, this happens, and the most non-imposing people, and you can never. And I'm not justifying the way they handled these girls at this protest, but you can never assume that a girl, just a tiny girl, isn't you could say, let's just say, kind of crazy. She seems normal, but she's nuts, and she grabbed a gun that day and put it in her waistband, and down her pants or something. And when I go to grab her, even though she's petite, if she turns around on me, I absolutely have to step up the amount of force that I use on her. Now, does that mean I pick her up and throw her into stuff? No. The only reason I do that is if she suddenly was doing karate moves on me, and I would do whatever I could to take control of her if she knew how to fight or something. But what I would do is have to step up the amount of force on her. I can't let her have control, even if she's a tiny little girl, because like I said, who knows? That morning she could have had a little 380 tucked down in her pants. Not likely at all. But it's still possible. We can't go on likelihoods. I mean, we do often, but really when it comes to officer safety, we shouldn't. And so what you have here is a situation where if someone turns on me, this gentleman, back to this murder, he turns on me, I think you can understand what I've just explained. I can't let him do that, and it's about me being able to go home that night. It's not about like, screw everybody else, I'm going home, my life is worth more than anyone else's. No, but my life is definitely worth more than to risk to just assume somebody is not going for a gun and they're just turning around on me. Unfortunately, to a lot of people, and I agree it sucks, but when an officer is taking you under their control, taking you into arrest, detaining you, if you resist, the laws have supported, because of what I've just articulated, that an officer can take you under control. Now, an officer cannot use excessive force. You've heard of that before, and that's because it exists, and for good reason. That exists because it does, because it happens. So, all that said, understand that anytime somebody is resisting, and this is true even for murder suspect, I use that as an easy one. But if I just got a jaywalker, just say I just got a jaywalker. All you do is jaywalk, and I see that a lot. I see a lot that I see, people I know personally that will see video of somebody being arrested that committed a minor crime, and they're getting, 3 officers on them, and they're wrestling them down. Kind of like the "don't tase me, bro" thing. Even if it's a minor crime, jaywalking, or whatever it is, well, it's a minor, if littering, like they threw their cigarette butt down, that's arrestable in some municipalities. If I were to go up and deal with that person and say, hey man, you littered, got to write you a ticket, strict enforcement, and he turns around to go to walk away from me. Now again, it's not about respect my authority, but it is about, we can't let people just walk away from us, because that could be somebody that just murdered their wife and kids. That could be somebody that just did something very heinous, and that's why they're walking away from us. If somebody just doesn't like that I'm a police officer stopping him, that may be true, and I'm sorry about that, but if you walk away from me, you've now given me a lot more reason to detain you, because now I'm thinking, hey, I'm engaging you, so if you're walking away from me, now you've given me a big signal, whether it's true or not, that it's possible that you may have something else going on. But I've got the articulable crime on you, littering, even though it's minor, that I have the right to stop you and detain you. I even have the right to put you in handcuffs, put you in my cruiser, and take you to jail on it. I'm not going to do that. Most officers will never do that on just a minor crime, unless it's a small municipality or something. But the point being is, when I then grab a hold of that person, if he turns on me or swings at me, anything, just swings his arm up, whatever, I've got to immediately turn the force on. Again, not excessive, but enough to get him under control. And at times that will be to the ground, and it's not because I'm trying to slam him to the ground. And I've taken people to the ground several times, and I've never had to slam them. Let me think about that for a second. If I have, it's been documented. We have to document every use of force we do. But I don't. If it was somebody very big, pretty big. So what I would do is get a hold of this person and have to step it up as much as I could. Now, the moment I've got him under control, say I get him to the ground, and he's motherfucking me left and right, and I get his arm behind his back, and I've got another car coming, air for another car, he's still resisting me. And I get him in. If I can get him in the position where I've got him in what's called pain compliance, where you got their hand behind their back and you got their arm like this, and that's really, really effective. It totally stops most resistors from doing anything. We put each other in it, in training, and feel it. It's a pretty significant pain. It's pain compliance, is what it's called. And they were trained to do it, and of course it just makes sense. You don't put too much pain. You don't, because then you've taken away the reward, if you will. What you do is, as they resist, you push just a little bit where they feel the pain, they stop, they stiffen up, you light up to where they're not feeling any pain. And if they start resisting again, you got to do that. And the reason why is because, again, if they're resisting and you let them, they could go for a gun. And that's happened at least twice where somebody has been resisting me and they've had a weapon on them. One had a loaded 9mm that he was going for. Another one had a knife in his pocket, like a homemade knife. That he was going for when I was arresting him. And the one with the knife, that was for a minor crime. That was just a mere shoplifting, which is typically just take a report and they do a civil process. So the point being, with a minor crime, I needed to search him to make sure, and then he resisted, and I had to put more force on him, and he was reaching into his pocket. By the time I got him on the ground, I didn't know what he was going for. I could tell because just these signs of the way he was tensing up, there was something he was hiding. And he may have even only just been going for the knife to try to discard it, thinking he was going to be charged with, carrying it. But the point is, I can't, bank on that. I can't, again, I don't even know what he's going for. It could be a gun in that pocket. Point being is, I get him on the ground, I, find the knife, and so, that happens. Now, the point being, you're blinded by the cat, you're going to go. But the point of all that is just to kind of really drive it home how even the most subtle resistance, we have to make sure we go home at night. Because 99% of the time, they're not going for a gun, whatever, but it's always that time when that officer took it too easy that he gets shot and killed and does not go home at night, and the wife or girlfriend has the cruiser pull up out front to give them the bad news. That's what I'm avoiding for me. That's what every officer avoids. Okay, so hopefully you understand about resisting. Even the slightest bit of resistance, even if it's just because you're incredulous, you don't know why the officer is arresting you. The officer does have the Supreme Court upheld right to do what they can to control you. Also, if you've committed a crime, I know, just leaves the protest out of this for a second. Officers can abuse that. What I mean by abuse that is, they can abuse it and still be within the Supreme Court upheld right to do it. That is, for example, there's a video out there of a officer who was had a traffic stop, I believe, and there was a woman recording him. Let me just say right off the bat, I am vehemently against any laws that would prohibit a civilian of filming me doing my job. Does it make me feel uncomfortable? Yes. Do I not like to be filmed when I'm in uniform and doing my job? Sure, absolutely, I don't like it. But my discomfort by no means trumps their right as a civilian to film me, a public servant, doing my job. I want to be very clear about that. In fact, that discomfort I feel is nothing compared to the pride I feel being in a country where a civilian has a right to film me. So that being said, I want you to know I do not support in any way, shape, or form the prohibition of civilians filming police officers, and I am infuriated that it's a felony in some states. That needs to be changed. Enough about that. Anyway, point being is, even though I disagree with that law, when she was told she has to stop, now, a police officer can order you to stop doing anything. They don't have to explain it. And I could give you a ton of examples in my job where very good reason why I'm telling somebody to get back up off the street during an emergency that, that suddenly is unfolding that nobody knows about yet. And how, we have to tell people to do certain things. Or we're making an arrest and somebody's coming up and I say, I tell them they need to get back over into that yard. Like, I give them specific distance to get away. I have a right to do that, within reason, and if they don't, I've got to let them know, look, you got to get back. I don't have time to explain it. Therefore, when they're coming up on us and they're distracting us, hey, that's my cousin, hey, that's my brother, I'll do everything I can to tell that person to get back, you stay back over there. A lot of times they're, people are pissed off that an officer's telling them to move out of their own yard or whatever. It's a free country, and it is, absolutely. And I don't mean to put air quote around that as though it's a trivial matter. It's not. But all I mean is they don't really grasp what's going on. They will default to the officer as just being an ass and abusing his authority, as opposed to a very good reason they can't really explain right now. Anyway, I've got countless examples of having to do that. Like I really don't have time to explain to the civilian, and they're defying me in something I need to do. And it's not about respect my authority. It's about, we've got to get this done. I've got to secure the scene. You have to move your car. You need to get out of here, whatever it is. So, all that being said, hopefully I've really driven it home about arresting, the slightest bit of arrest. The abuse that officers can do is, I can know that somebody is turning on me because they don't know what's going on. I mean, I've done that before. I've arrested, I've grabbed, people, twice my size, and who had warrants. I pull them over and, warrant, I'm cool with them and all, but I have to show a command presence, because it's been established and proven that when a criminal or a wanted felon or a wanted person wants to get away, I mean, these are just straight from the mouths of the prisoners themselves. They size up the officer. They look at that officer and they say, if he looks like I can take him, I'm probably going to try it. So you've got to exude a little bit of, some officers maybe go over the top of that, but you've got to let them know you're in control. Anyway, point being is, I arrested one guy, and I could tell he was I could tell he was completely confused. Now, it could have been an act. He could have been using that as a ploy to get to his gun. But the sum total circumstances, I'm still not going to lax up and keeping him under control. But here's the abuse. Here's the difference between abuse and not. I go to put his hands behind his back, and he turns on. He turns his shoulder, turns everything. Now, that enough gives me the Supreme Court upheld right, because he could be going for a gun. Just take him to the ground, get him, even, no matter what I got to do to get him under control. I got to take him off balance. Taking to the ground is one way we take people off balance. If they're thinking how they're going to get to their gun while they're standing, well, now they're going to have to reevaluate how they're getting their gun while they're on the ground. It's just a way to shake up the scenario and be in control, and get them down and get their arm behind their back, et cetera, et cetera. So the abuse is, he turned around and he said, I got his arm behind his back. He turned on me, and I pushed into him. I pushed him against his car, not like slammed him, but I pushed him against his car, and I had to, like I said, it's just one of those things you got to let him know you're in control. And I just said, hey, don't turn around on me. You don't want this to go south. And then he said, oh, yeah, okay, I understand. And so then I got him in his cuffs. And then, of course, every time I get somebody in their cuffs, I treat them with utmost respect. Utmost respect. I don't arrest bad people. I arrest good people having a bad day. And so the point being is, the abuse would have been when he turned, if I just felt like it, if I was one of those kind of officers that wanted to just, hated this person for some reason, maybe didn't like their contempt or their attitude towards me, I could use that he turned on me as an excuse to slam him on the ground. So you can see how they can abuse that, yet be within what is allowed by the Supreme Court, or policy, which the policy has to abide by the Supreme Court. And so, that being said, what happened there, I can't know if they're within the Supreme Court policy when they sprayed that mace. The one guy sprayed the mace. That is a common crowd control thing where people are acting out. Now, also surrounding with orange fencing. We've had to do. I haven't done it personally myself, but my department has done that. Now, keep in mind, we don't just go right. At least I can't know whether they did this unprovoked or not. We've done it, but it was absolutely provoked, quote unquote. It's where you have people that are demonstrating, and our department's really good at accommodating protesters. I mean, we've escorted impromptu, huge, groups of students just marching right down the main thoroughfare street in our downtown, from the university down to downtown. And it's impromptu, not planned, they have no permit, but we escort them. As long as that's all they're doing, they're getting there, making and then they get to a certain spot, and as long as wherever they get to, which was the State House, so it wasn't a big deal, but, as long as the business owner, if they say they're protesting a bank and they go up into the front of the bank, if the business owner doesn't care, then we don't care. Well, what happens is, if protesters are blocking the entrance to a bank, making a protest, what you have to understand is that's why protests make the news. That's why protests are good. That's why dissent is good. That's why these people are unbelievably brave that are going and doing this, because they are risking arrest. They are risking being put under arrest. If that kind of thing matters to them. So when they go there, if for example, in the scenario I'm referring to, if they're, they march up there, all the officers hands off. I'm not saying that's what happened here. They're blocking the entrance of the bank. We don't enforce it. We can't enforce it. We're not allowed to enforce laws on private property unless there's certain laws we can. But as far as them just standing there, peacefully talking, and peacefully doing nothing, peacefully standing or sitting, until the bank says, hey, we need these people to get out of here, we can't do anything. But when the bank does say, we need to get these people out of here, we are required to remove them. We are public servants. We have to, if you have somebody on your yard and you say, I want that person out of my yard, we have to remove that person. We can't refuse you. I can't go up to your house and say, hey, this guy's been sitting in my yard all day. I want him to leave. If I go over to him and say, hey, buddy, what you doing, and he decides, I'm camping out here, I'm protesting, whatever. I tell him, so, well, unfortunately, you got to leave. And he'd say, I got a right to protest. And I would tell him, well, you absolutely do, but you have to leave this gentleman's yard. It's private property. Well, private property is bullshit, and I might even agree with you, but that's not the way it is, though. It's the way the law is. The private property, you can't stay on it if the person who owns the property wants you to leave. So anyway, I'd be required to make that guy leave. If he refused to leave, he said, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just sitting here. Well, it looks like on camera he's doing nothing wrong. Now imagine somebody's filming this, and this is me, Officer Joe. I say, buddy, look, you got to go, man, or else I gotta arrest you, because I can't just move you. You know, I have to arrest you. If I got to use force on you, you know. And so if he refuses to leave, you know, I've got to put my hands on him. I'm required to for you. You say, I want this guy out of my yard. I have to do. I can't tell you. I can't look up at you and go, man, he's not leaving. You know, I really don't want to get involved with this. I'm the police. I'm the police officer you called. I'm what your tax dollars pay. I have to take that guy off your property. So when he refuses, and after you know, trying to talk to this guy, finally I got to put hands on him. If he tries to pull away from me, then I've got to work harder on him, right, as I described. And then, you know, just as far as, you know, stepping up, well, if he's, you know, turns over and rolls on his hands, that's a huge red flag. You know, he may not be going for a gun, but oh my God, that'll get your adrenaline spiking big time if you're a police officer and you're trying to get somebody arrested and they're reaching towards the front of them. And they could be reaching anywhere. That gun could be anywhere, but if there is one, or a knife. And we just had an officer stabbed just a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago, by somebody who had a knife who he was arresting. Anyway, the point being, guess what that looks like in the camera shows? It doesn't show that half an hour of me saying, buddy, man, you got to go. And I don't want to do this, you know, but, you know, Mr. Smith here, you know, this is his yard. So then the video catches me at that point where I'm finally putting my hands on him. He's resisting me, puts his hands underneath the body, and I, you know, I've got to now get the pressure on him because I'm scared to death he's going to come out with a gun. So I'm like trying to keep his arms in there at the same time while getting one out at a time and observing that hand as it's coming out. And you know, I got to have the command presence, so I got to scream at him. You know, that has to happen. It's all about so I can go home tonight. You know, I don't want to arrest the guy. I don't want to take him to jail, but he has forced this issue. And now it's not retribution. I just got to get his hand behind his back and get him, you know, in handcuffs. Now, as I do this, if the camera's catching this, you know, the more he resists, or if he starts screaming especially and starts kind of flailing, you know, I got to do everything I can to just completely get him under control. If he's bigger than me, you know, I'm not the biggest guy, you know, in the world. I'm tall, but I'm not the biggest guy. If the guy's bigger than me, that's a big deal. I mean, he can just turn around and just sock me. You know, I got to watch for that too. I got to watch for him just cold cocking me right in the jaw. I'm knocked out or really dizzy. Guess what's right here on my hip that he can grab? And that's happened. We can't let that happen. So anyway, get him secured. If the video sees me fighting with him, or if he's bigger than me and another officer comes up on the scene because I air for it and runs up and we jump on him and we're getting him and we're yelling at him, and well, imagine now it's a little girl, like 5 foot tall and 102 pounds, you know, in a midriff shirt and, you know, tight jeans. You know, what's the chances she's got a knife on her or a gun on her? Again, you can't go on that. You cannot go on the chances. Now, look how that looks when I say, you know, miss, you got to go. You know, I don't want to do this, but you got to go. And she just says, I'm not doing anything wrong. And I explained to her, well, actually, it's called trespassing. It's criminal trespassing because they want you to leave. And you have to leave. Well, we go through this whole thing again, except now it's a little girl. And I have to put hands on her, and they're actually more wiry usually. They're harder to deal with. It's actually, I've discovered. When I go to get her in control and she's, you know, she resists or pulls away, I got to do whatever I can. Now, here's the thing. Of course, it's never appropriate, nor should it ever be, and it should be disciplined if ever an officer, when they're arresting a female, deliberately gropes her breasts. The point is, as we're trained, and for good reason, we don't have to think about where we're grabbing someone that's resisting arrest. We just grab them however we can, and if my hand ends up on her breast, it just does. Now, again, though, if that's any way intentional by an officer, it absolutely should be dealt with. Unacceptable. But it does inadvertently occur. And it's not just like an accidental, we can't, because it's an officer safety thing. Like if I feel that my hand goes across her breast, I go, oh, I don't want to do that, and I try to move my hand somewhere else. It doesn't go that way. It's just get a hold of her, get her on the ground. Now, video sees me manhandling a tiny girl. You know, if she's wiry and, you know, or she even begins to resist me, I don't know what she's going for. again, though, I'm not saying these guys on that video of the protesters actually were handling these girls the way I would. I'll say this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from fellow officers, but if they see this, which is that I mean, I can't judge them. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm not saying which ones, but in a few cases, I'm not going to say which specific ones, it did appear to be that the officer was in the contempt of cop mode. Contempt of cop is something we say that when an officer, out of retribution, affects an arrest on somebody, or fine, in other words, contempt of cop is not a crime, nor should it be. But that's why we say it, to really drive it home. You can't arrest somebody. To officers, training, make sure you're paying attention when you're upset with somebody and then they've actually committed a crime. The difference between the two. So that being said, I would have to see more. I don't like how some of the commentators keep saying, obviously doing nothing wrong, but they're not showing the video, because if these people are told, you have to leave, you cannot stay, and they say, we're not going anywhere, we're staying here. Now we're kind of same scenario of the individual in the front yard. Now again, I know corporations, fuck the corporations, fuck the banks, I'm with you on that, trust me, God, I hate banks. Anyway, doesn't matter what I hate, I have to enforce the law, right? So you tell them they got to go, then you give them, you say, you got 5 minutes, or you give them time, usually. I don't know if these cops did. Give them time. They don't leave. You even give them more time. They don't leave. That's what we would do in our department, for example, because we are making it clear as a bell that we afforded every ability, for the person to comply with the law. Now, when they don't leave, well, the way they collect them is that way, with the orange fencing. And it's because they're under arrest at that point. They're all criminally trespassing, depending on where they are, where they're standing, of course. And I'm not saying that's awesome. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. It's the law. So they're all under arrest. So they temporarily capture them with an orange fencing. Now, at that point, what they do is, what typically occurs, at least, is one by one, they're identified with their IDs or by looking them up, etc. And they're summoned to appear in court for criminal trespassing. Yes, then they're cut loose. They go home and they have to go to court. Unless there's other directives passed down by the mayor or something that says, they all go to jail, which I don't think that's happened in our town. Anyway, so with the commentator saying they did nothing wrong, they may not have done anything wrong, but I would like to see the video of them doing nothing wrong, because if they did stay at that location after being told repeatedly by the police that they have to leave, and I'm not saying that it's awesome, but the way the law is, they have to leave. If not, then they're under arrest, and then the police have the right to arrest them and take them to jail if they want, if it's a arrestable offense in that jurisdiction, which typically criminal trespassing is. So then, when those officers start to collect them, that's when we start seeing the video, right? And we start seeing, the cameras are, showing these very petite girls being dragged and saying, "Don't touch me." And I noticed that some of the commentators, these very respectable commentators, are saying, you can hear her say, "Don't touch me," and these officers are touching her. Well, I'm sorry, you don't get that right when you're under arrest. And I'm not saying that they had the right to arrest her, or they I don't know. I mean, I assume that they did if they're arresting her, especially because the police department said that what the officers did was within policy. If that's the case, then that's what they did. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that's what they did because the department said that. I'm just saying that if it was that they were criminally trespassing, then they were in their rights to grab that girl, no matter how petite she was, and arrest her. And if she is to twist and turn, they have the right to apply force to her. I'm not saying any force, because that's of course not true, and they should not be allowed to apply any force. there was a guy I saw a video of with a very high dollar camera. I didn't get to see much research on that, but I assume he was a journalist. And at one point, it shows one officer grab him, and I did not like the sensationalistic way it described that, because the way I looked at it, it's possible, again, I don't want to get flamed for this. I will agree that, okay, maybe you're right, maybe he did deliberately do it. It didn't look like he deliberately swung him into the car. It looked like he just grabbed, which already, who knows whether he should have grabbed the guy or not, but I can only assume that an officer is doing what he's legally supposed to do. We should all be able to assume that, but we should all scrutinize it, critically evaluate it, and as everybody is doing, and I agree with that, and I support it. Anyway, when he grabbed him, it looked more inadvertent because of the way he grabbed him, that they went into the car. Like, in other words, he was trying to take him to the ground, but because the guy stayed on his feet, he kept going around in a half circle into the car. So it seemed kind of sensationalist, and I'm not about sensationalism at all. I hate it when Fox News does it. I despise Fox News, and that's all they do, and I really don't like it when people on our side, against police brutality, stuff like that, sensationalize. It's just not okay to do the same thing. He may have intentionally thrown him into the hood of that car. I didn't really see that. Anyway, it doesn't exonerate anything necessarily. So those officers are all, like the one spraying the mace. Let me kind of explain that a little bit. If they were telling them to step back from the orange fencing, like they're saying, you need to step back from the orange, you need to step back, and they're not. They're coming up on it, and they're just, when they're yelling at him, screaming at him. Now, I agree with you. It's very easy for an officer to respond to the contempt of cop and not a real crime. But it's crowd control measure that's protected. We can spray mace to get a crowd to disperse or whatever. And as you saw, it did, except for the one girl screaming on the ground, because it hurts, man. We were maced. I was pepper sprayed in my academy, and God, that hurt. I was tased as well, and the tasing was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. 5-second ride. When we hit people, it's for 3 seconds. We had to do a 5-second ride, and that was unbelievable pain. But I would take the tasing over the macing, because the tasing was over with. After 5 seconds, done. You're done. I mean, you're kind of like, you got the adrenaline flow, and you don't want to get hit again, but with the shock. But it was over in 5 seconds. The macing, the pepper spraying was. It felt like steel wool. Like, somebody opened up your eyelids and just taking steel wool and rubbing it on your eyes. It just, oh man, you have backing your head up because you're trying to get away from whatever it is that's doing that. And it just went on for like 45 minutes, So anyway, she's screaming because she probably got hit right in the eyes, and it is painful. Some people are impervious to it. So I just noticed my cat peeking over my shoulder. Anyway, that's Ruby, everybody. So I hope this kind of puts things into perspective. I'm not saying that I'm exonerating the officers and what they've done. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is, what I saw, nothing, I can't say that anything was illegal, what they did, because everything they did would be legal depending on what occurred ahead of time, which was any defiance of orders that were lawful. So hopefully that puts it in a nutshell for you. I'm sorry it was so long, but unfortunately, it only takes a few words to have a wrong idea. It takes 1,000 to explain why it's a wrong idea. And I know a lot of people say a lot of things about resisting. But like I said, even if it's a minor thing, littering or not leaving a football stadium like that old Jets fan. Apologize for the cut there, if you noticed it. But that old Jets fan, I was just going to say, I realized I didn't know what, I want to try to give a source link for that, but it didn't matter. Anyway, it was just a Jets fan that there's a whole lot of other stuff behind that there's a whole other different explanation of how that happened. That was completely within what policies we would have as well. Nonetheless, like I say, I'm sorry this was so long, but this is, I just want it to be known that, whatever, if I've said something you disagree with, please let me know. I really try to be good at admitting I'm wrong. So, let me know if I've misspoke or if I said something inaccurate. I want to fix it because I'm real big on not getting inaccurate information out there. So, also, if you want to share this, please do with anybody, with the other, and try to preface it with don't get mad at this guy. You've got a problem. He really wants to, because I really want to be work with people as much as I can to try to understand it and for me to understand. Appreciate you watching this long, if you did, and hopefully I can provide, some thoughtful input on other issues in the future. Thanks.